Good evening, everyone. My name is Mark Skelsey and I will be facilitating tonight's event. I was delighted actually to be appointed on the 2nd of May, which is only last week, as the Council's engagement and internal communication lead. Now, we've got a few housekeeping matters. I'd like to acknowledge the attendance tonight of Councillors Anna Greco, Robert Samuel, Nick Wright, Jam Shah and Georgie Rosek. Mayor Taylor asked us to send apologies. She had to attend another event tonight. Apologies if there are other councillors who are in attendance who registered late. Here tonight as well is on my left is Maxine Kenyon, who's the Customer and Corporate Director, who will be giving us a presentation on the subject of tonight's event, which is our draft Community Strategic Plan and related documents. Also our Corporate Strategic Planner, Katrina Vajanik, and our Community Engagement Specialist, Tanya Stark. So first, let me acknowledge the traditional owners of country in Willoughby and pay respect to their elders past and present. I acknowledge the traditional inhabitants of the land on which we stand, the Aboriginal people, their spirits and ancestors. I acknowledge the vital contribution that Indigenous people and cultures have made and still make to the nation that we share, Australia. So we've got the agenda there on the screen, and can I say that tonight is all about listening to you and what you've got to say about our draft Corporate Strategic Plan and our future Willoughby 2032. To help inform this feedback, we'll be giving a presentation focusing on the 7 key trends and issues which have driven this update of our planning documents and what we've got planned for the coming year. We'll have an open mic Q&A session at the end. We'll explain a little bit more about that in a moment. Just some housekeeping. The session will be recorded and published. Naturally, we ask that comments and questions be respectful, as they will be seen by others, and everyone's mics are actually on mute and will stay on mute unless selected to speak at the question and answer session at the end. Now, I can tell you that it probably might be a good idea of how we run the engagement session tonight. I just thought I'd let you know that this is actually a hybrid event. We have people attending both online and we're in the council chamber here at Chatswood. Now, during Maxine's presentation, we'd encourage everyone to post questions and comments using the Zoom chat and Q&A function. You should be able to see those logos at the bottom of your screen. And thank you, Robert. I notice we're delighted you're here as well. In breaks between Maxine's presentation, we'll seek to highlight and possibly respond to some comments and questions. We won't get to all, but we do encourage some lively debate. All comments and questions will be captured and included in our outcomes engagement report. If we can't answer them tonight, we'll seek to publicly respond to them in the near future. Once the presentation is over, we want to leave a good amount of time at the end for an open mic question and answer session. We do have some people here in the chamber tonight who aren't able to take advantage of the Zoom chat feature because they're here in person. We're going to make sure they have plenty of time to make open mic comments at the end. And for everyone on the Zoom call who wants to talk at this stage of the evening, that's the Q&A session at the end, please raise your hand. There's a few little housekeeping matters there and we'll go over those again when we get closer to that portion of the event. And with great pleasure, I'm now going to pass across to Maxine to give a presentation on the Willoughby plans.
Thanks, Mark. Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for attending. It is a bit off-putting when you're talking to an empty screen, so I can't see any of your faces or your reactions. So apologies if I'm going too fast or slow. If I am, Mark can just nudge me. So what we're here for tonight is to give you an overview of our community strategic plan, our delivery program, our operational plan, and our resourcing strategy, which are all out for public exhibition at the moment. The community strategic plan is a 10-year plan, and it's the most important strategic document that council produces. It sets out the community's priorities and aspirations for the next 10 years. This document isn't just a council document. Other stakeholders need it to inform how they work with Willoughby and what the community's aspirations are and how they meet those aspirations. The Community Strategic Plan is supported and underpinned by other council documents, particularly the Delivery Program and the Operational Plan. The Delivery Program is a 4-year plan. This year, because we've got a shortened council term, it's slightly less than 4 years. But that sets out what council intends to do to achieve the aspirations of the Community Strategic Plan over the next term of office for the councillors. The Operational Plan is an annual sub-plan. It outlines council's activities for the year 2022 to 2023. It also identifies our budget for the next year, the fees and charges for the next year, the rates for the next year, and also highlights all the projects and capital works and activities that we will be doing to implement our delivery program, which in turn supports the delivery of the Community Strategic Plan. The resourcing strategy includes 3 documents: our long-term financial plan, our asset management strategy, and our workforce plan. The long-term financial plan is a 10-year plan, the asset management strategy is a 4-year plan, and our workforce plan is reviewed annually but aims to be a 4-year plan. We won't be going into a lot of detail tonight about the resourcing strategy. However, in the Q&A, if you have questions about that, we'd be happy to answer them. So I wanted to set the scene a little bit and tell you how we got here. So in 2017-18, the Community Strategic Plan 2028 was developed. It's called Our Future Willoughby. And I'm assuming a lot of you who are online would have either seen that or been involved in that, in developing that a few years ago. What we're doing now is actually refreshing that document. What we have done is check to ensure it continues to represent the needs and aspirations and priorities of our community, and it's not to rewrite the plan. What we have done is in 2018 to now, we've looked at our community perception and wellbeing surveys, which we've undertaken across the LGA. And we've also considered the other strategies and plans that council has developed, as well as other state government departments. This last year, at the end of last year, we've had consultation with state government departments, different community organisations and different networks to understand what the changing needs were over the last few years since the first development of the 10-year plan. Where we are now is a redraft and a refresh, and we're wanting to open that up to have that discussion with you around, have we identified the changes and trends that have emerged over those years, and are they reflected in the revisions that we've made to all of these 4 documents? So the Willoughby Community Strategic Plan, as I said, it's very aspirational and it's high level. It assists council to make more informed decisions about the best ways to address trends and issues, and it provides certainty for our future priorities. It outlines where we want to be. So the vision is included in this document for the LGA, not for council, for the LGA. It also includes outcomes, what we're trying to achieve, and what emerging trends and issues need to be addressed and how they'll be addressed through community priorities. The word strategic is really, it's intentional. As I said, this is a high level and aspirational plan. It isn't just a council document. Other stakeholders align to this, and we align to the work of state government in preparing this as well. So what we have done, as I mentioned, we've considered all the emerging trends and issues that have impacted the LGA, our city, over the last few years. I will go through in detail all of these trends, and we'll have an opportunity to understand if there are any key themes or issues that you've been raising in the chat. So I'm not sure, Mark, has anyone started using the chat? And I just want to make sure people understand how to use it.
No, we don't have any comments as yet.
Okay. So, as I said, we're facing a number of challenges, and these 7 here are the ones that we've identified as our biggest issues at the moment, that will take us through for the next few years, and what we need to address through the revisions that we've made in the community strategic plan, the delivery program, and the operational plan. So the first one I'll go through is resilience. Resilience has come about in recent years, and Council is a member of Resilient Sydney. We have adopted a resilient Willoughby plan over the last few years. And to understand the issue of resilience, if you look at the graphic on your screen, there are a lot of shocks, and I won't go through the detail of those, and there are a lot of stresses. The shocks are generally sudden and relatively short term, but the stresses, they're the things that weaken the community and the fabric of the community over time. They're the things that make it harder for us to deal with the shocks, particularly for those who are more vulnerable in our community. Given these challenges that we've seen, Council really needs to lead resilience and adaptability of its community and services and infrastructure to be able to meet the challenges that these issues on the screen raise. We have had, and I'm sure everyone's very familiar, we've had a lot more extreme weather events. We've had more bushfires, more rainfall, and all of these have environmental, financial, social and health implications for Willoughby, and unless managed, will impact some of our most vulnerable people. So Council has put in place measures to assist the community to be more resilient, and I'll go through some of those in a moment. As I mentioned, the community strategic plan has 5 outcome areas. And given the emerging need and the pressures around our shocks and stresses and the impact that may have on our community, it was felt that including resiliency in one of our outcomes, which it wasn't before, was a priority. So in the revised version, which is on public exhibition, outcome 2 includes a city that is connected, inclusive and resilient. So we've drawn that out into that high-level outcome. We have also added a new community priority to increase community resilience to shocks and stresses. And some of the specific actions listed, and these are all included in the delivery program. So after each trend, I'll go through what are some of the actions, but after I go through this, then I'll go through the operational plan. So I won't go through the detail of the delivery program because that's included in these slides. So for resilience, we will be implementing the resilience strategy and action plan. We'll be addressing climate change through 100% renewable energy generation and purchase, and looking at solar bulk buy program for residents and community education initiatives.
So we've got one comment that's come in that talked about housing affordability, which we're about to discuss in a second. The comment that we're not allowing apartments at Brown Street, Chatswood to be used as residential, but instead keep as serviced apartments. So that's to do with housing affordability, and that's obviously something that we can further research and respond to at the appropriate time. But thank you for the comment.
So can I just clarify for those online, any comments that you put in the chat, we will keep those and we will provide a response to everyone who's logged in for tonight, and we've got your details. So we'll provide a response to that. If there are specific questions that I don't know or the other staff here are not aware of, or we don't know the detail, we'll get back to you certainly. So any questions, please put them in the chat. If we can, we'll go through them tonight, and if we can't, we'll get back to you. The next trend in terms of resilience was COVID-19, and obviously that's something that everyone is very familiar with and everyone's impacted by. So some of the trends that we have identified, a lot more people working from home, and that's gone from 30% in 2015 to 40% in August 2021. And given the number of professional workers we have in Willoughby LGA, I would imagine that there's a lot more capability for those workers to be able to work from home. Obviously, when people are working from home, there's a lot more interaction with the local centres and parks and open space, which we have found over the last few years. People are shifting from public transport to cars, and I think that's slightly lessened, but I think it's still a continued issue, particularly with more people working from home, and that may lead to potential congestion issues. Mental health impacts of increased isolation, particularly around young people and older community members. With a lot more people working from home, with a lot of lockdowns, we've seen that in the response to our community wellbeing survey, and it's certainly an area that we're very conscious of in terms of the programs and services that we need to provide and advocate for in our community. Obviously, the impact on council finances, and I'm sure we're not alone in this, there are many businesses out there who have felt the impact of COVID, as have individuals. The lower revenue for us, if we've closed services, we've reduced our revenue, but we've also had to increase some of the services that we provide to parks and shared paths, which may not have been budgeted for. Other economic impacts we have, including rate pegging, which I'll go into at the end. We've got labour shortages due to COVID, inflationary prices associated with disruption of goods and materials supply chain. That's a significant issue we've felt already, and we expect that that will continue for a lot longer. These are some of the challenges in relation to COVID that we need to, as a council, be able to respond and plan for over the next few years. So given that, Council has expanded the priority 3.1 to refer to strengthen the need for inclusion. And some of the actions that we're doing, we're implementing our economic development strategy, working with businesses across the LGA. We're implementing a shop local campaign. As some of you may have seen, we're trying to activate a number of laneways in the CBD, and many more will be coming online for that. And we've got a number of enhancements proposed for a number of ovals, parks and playgrounds over the next few years, as well as some of the improvements to local centre streetscapes. As I mentioned, with a lot more people working from home, they're utilising their local centres a bit more, which is great for those businesses and creating that village feel.
So, Maxine, we've had some good comments that have come in. Got one comment there about what is the cost of switching to 100% renewable energy? How long is it scheduled to take? Not sure again. We can try to see if we can get an answer tonight, if not afterwards. As well, a comment here that people can see that they can't see any resilience provision for local flooding in terms of funding for increased rainfall. So that's a different way of looking at it, and a good comment as well. So thank you for those coming in.
And certainly, can I say in terms of the flooding, given the recent floods, council staff are certainly looking at our asset condition of those that infrastructure, and identifying what we may need to do in future, and developing our asset management plans in further detail to be able to support some of those challenges that we've seen in more recent times. Okay, moving along. The next trend was the urban tree canopy. So this was raised by a number of individuals and also state government departments. And obviously obviously Willoughby has a lot of tree cover. However, there has been a decrease in private residential areas over the last few years, as you can see there. And it's often by increased development, people developing larger dwellings on their block of land, so needing to remove trees, but as well as the state planning laws, which allow exempt and complying development to be overseen by private certifier, which then overrides council's planning controls, which we actually aim to protect trees. So there's some of the challenges that we've got with urban tree canopy. And I guess for some people who may not understand, obviously the provision of shade and urban amenity, but the ecological habitat, as well as when there's a lot more development, there's a lot more materials that soak up the heat. So, you know, if you have more pavers and buildings, it becomes hotter in those CBD areas in particular. So there's some of the challenges that we have that is the reason why we really wanted to focus on urban tree canopy in the revised community strategic plan. And in that, we have amended the priority 1.1 to include urban tree canopy and greening. We have added a new measure, and this measure relates to council's document as well, our planning document, our local strategic planning statement, as well as incorporating requirements for rooftop and deep soil plantings in high pedestrian traffic areas. We will also undertake a street tree census by June 2024. I'm not sure how that will work, but I'm sure we'll do that well.
So Maxine, the comments are coming in. So we have one comment there that you potentially can answer. The council rates are based on a percentage of land value. With the increase in land value in the last few boom years, council should be receiving higher rates. How is it that council receive less revenue? Just maybe park your response to that one. I'll just mention one more. I've had to, another comment here, trees specifically. I've had to step in to interrupt the unauthorised logging of major trees in my street. Many residents are unaware they must seek permission. There's need for greater advertising of this issue. Thank you, great comment. Also a comment here laid as well about ranger resourcing, and a comment saying that high-rise development may be in contradiction with our plans for tree canopy as well. So thank you for that comment too. Maybe just the rates one we can look at.
The rates one, I will be talking about rates later on. So I'll just preempt that by saying we have a cap on rates. So unfortunately, we can only ask for we only get a certain increase. And although we may like more than what the state government provide us at the moment, we're subject to rate capping. So I will go into a bit more detail in that in the finance section at the end. And certainly there's some information on our website around our rates and how they're calculated, and some of the constraints and challenges we have in managing that. But I will go into that towards the end of the presentation. Thanks. Okay, the other trend is on government policy changes, and this is significant. And you know, the rates pegging issue comes into that as well. So there are new and ongoing state level policies, including the new resource recovery targets, reducing waste generated by 10% per person and 80% recovery rate from all waste streams. We've got a reduction in infrastructure contributions from new development. So that's when developers develop in our area. It used to be called developer contributions. They would pay council or provide some funding to council to provide community infrastructure. And the state government has proposed to significantly change that, which will limit the opportunity for council to receive as much contribution as they have in the past. And obviously the ongoing rate peg challenge, which again I'll go into at the end of this. One of the other things that has come up is also in terms of waste, which relates to the rate pegging. IPART, which is the Independent Pricing and Rate and Regulatory Tribunal, they determine our rate peg, which also includes our domestic waste levy, and they're looking at capping that. Currently it isn't capped, but they're looking at capping that. It's also at the same time when they're looking at requiring councils to implement food and organic waste systems, which will add considerable expenses to council in terms of rolling that out in a number of years.
So Maxine, some good comments coming in here. More comments about trees. How do you stop residents, developers poisoning trees to develop their property? Is there a go-to in council to assist? I think, again, we might have to take that one on notice, but that's now the second comment raised about concerns about tree damage, so that's good. Helen's made a comment. One comment here, units being built are smaller in the area, making it difficult for people to work from home. I think that's a good comment. Helen, I must say I don't entirely understand your other comment that the government previously wanted people to travel on public transport, but councils are now reducing the number of parking spaces and units. Maybe if you could just explain to us a little bit more clearly the connection between those two would be helpful for us, and we can get to it in a sec.
I think I've worked in a number of councils, and trees is always a very significant issue, whether people are pulling them down or putting too many up and blocking views. So certainly we've got some information which we can send out, and if there are these things that are coming up, other things like this, we can take this on board and update our website and any other social media channels to ensure that our community really have the right information for how to manage that and where to refer it on to. So thank you for your comments. Oh, okay, I covered off on that. Obviously, some of the challenges and trends that we've identified, council may not be the person who can change it. For instance, the rate pegging or the changes to waste decisions that the state government have made. However, part of our role can really be to advocate and lobby to support our aspirations that our community have told us. And over the last, I would say, 2 years, particularly for infrastructure contributions, council and council laws have taken a really active, proactive role in advocating on reducing the negative impact on our community in terms of infrastructure contributions and the changes that the state has proposed. For those wondering, we should just say, I think it was mentioned at the beginning, this is recorded and this presentation will be available. So if people are interested in this, we'll put this online so you can have access to it. Okay, so trend 6, we've got a number of demographic shifts. So our population has grown and it's expected to continue to grow. One of the key areas will be the greater proportion of people over 65. And from 2020 to 2026, there will be a nearly 28% increase in people in retirement age. That's a significant increase that we need to consider in terms of the types of infrastructure, services and programs that the changing demographics and the changing people in our community will need. This is also the case we need to consider in terms of the type of households. So by 2026, the largest increase is proposed for lone person's household. So the response, we've made an amendment to Community Priority 2.1 and made it a little bit more inclusive to reflect the change in what types of households that we will be having. We've added a new measure for safety, connection to local areas and ease of access to services and facilities. And we've also strengthened inclusion by being explicit in Priority 2.2 around our Indigenous people. And also one of the big elements, which I think again comes back to some of the issues around people working from home, is that digital divide and people needing to have digital literacy to be able to work from home, to manage their payments and a lot more online services that are now in place, particularly after COVID.
So we've got one extra comment raising as to whether the council should be using new technology to convert plastics into road-based materials, converting waste into energy. Good comment, and certainly very much in line with the direction about resource recovery. So thank you very much for that comment coming in.
And I can comment on that. Council a few years ago was working with NESROC, which is the Northern Sydney Regional Organisation of Councils, and SSROC, who were doing some work in terms of tenders for reusing plastics in road base and footpaths and things like that. So councils across New South Wales are very much aware of that. That process was supported by, I think it was Transport for New South Wales, certainly the state government. So those elements are very much in our mind, and if not, from memory, I understand that council was supportive of that, and if haven't already, we'll probably move towards doing some contracting around that. Okay, trend 6 was housing affordability. I would say everyone probably on this Zoom call knows that housing affordability in Willoughby can be a challenge. But one of the things that we did find in our wellbeing survey was 22% of Willoughby residents had to sacrifice spending on other things as a direct result of the increase in housing costs. So it went up slightly from 2019. But if you think about 21%, that's quite a number of people. And some of those were around food and groceries and medical treatment. So housing affordability is a significant issue for this area. Residents who are renting obviously have to sacrifice a little bit more of their spending. And Willoughby's housing price and rents aren't commensurate with our weekly income increase. So what that may mean is we may force out particular workers from this area or our younger population out of Willoughby because they simply can't afford to live here. And certainly in any community, you want a great mix of people to add to that community cohesion and the economic development of the area and the viability and vibrancy of that area. One more, sorry. So my clicker's a bit delayed. So in terms of the housing affordability, our response has been to add a new priority, promoting housing choice and affordability, and some of the specific actions in our delivery program included there, which complete the review of the LEP and Development Control Plan, which a number of you I'm sure have been having your say in terms of the public exhibition on at the moment. We're increasing affordable housing in new residential developments, and council is completing a construction of essential housing at Abbott Road in Artarmon. So we're doing some planning, but also some practical and infrastructure support to provide a good response to housing affordability.
So I've got an incoming question or comment. A resident of Archer Street raised concerns that 90-metre high buildings will be permitted in the area that will block that person's sunlight, resulting in overshadowing impacts, and a general question about how council deals with proposals that block sunlight. I'm not sure if you want to get into it, Maxine, or...
Yeah, unfortunately, I'm not the planning director, so I don't want to give you incorrect information, but certainly that information we can forward on to our planning department, who are looking at the LEP and DCP at the moment, which is on public exhibition. So that is a matter for that element, and we will certainly refer that to them, but we will give you a response to that anyway, just so you're aware of the next steps. Okay, I think this is our final trend. Trend 7 is around customer service and community engagement. And although the community strategic plan is very much focused on the aspirations of the community and not just council's response, it has come through in council surveys, and certainly I think just in terms of the way the expectations the community have of how they interact with us, state government, business, is around improved customer service and community engagement, particularly for government authorities. Council has recorded a high level of satisfaction in the provision of services and facilities and programs. We're above the benchmark that against other council areas. We do this survey every 2 years. And certainly in terms of our consultation and engagement, the data is telling us that people are happy with that. However, some of the focus, certainly from this council term, has been around improving and focusing in on customer service to our customers and how we engage our customers and our community. And these council engagement was the top suggested priority for council improvement. So we're very conscious of this. And I guess Mark and I, that's both our responsibility. So we're working together about how we can improve that. And some of the responses that we've got, we've added in a new community priority to really focus in on that. Around customer service, but also around reinforcing our engagement with people to inform decision making and to be engaged in that decision making. So some of the specific actions, we will be having a customer experience strategy by the end of this year, as well as a community engagement strategy. We've just opened our ground floor customer service centre, and we're trying to make some improvements before the strategy is in place, because we recognise, not only from council laws, but some of the more recent feedback from our customers and community in terms of delayed response times and closing the loop on some of their requests. So it's certainly a priority for the organisation that we've included in the CSP and within our response to that.
We have a comment just relating to an abandoned car, which concerningly is a no stopping zone. So thank you, Tanya, for just giving some technical information about how that can be reported, and thanks for the comment.
Great, thank you. Okay, so what I'm going to move on to now, that's the CSP, and that highlights what the trends and emerging issues are and what our response has been to the revised documents of the Community Strategic Plan. What I wanted to move on to now is more around the operational plan. So the operational plan, as I mentioned earlier, is the 1-year plan. So from July 1st this year to June 30th next year, it's what projects we will be doing in council, our budget, our rates, and our fees and charges. So they're the big elements of the operational plan, and I'll just run through some of those with you. And again, we will, Mark will go through any comments that we receive, and certainly we're trying to get through this relatively quickly, but with enough time for you to understand it, but also leave significant time to have Q&A. Okay, so for 2022-23, some of the major projects and capital works, we're doing an upgrade to the Willoughby Leisure Centre, and that will include 3 new pools, and it's around $10 million project. It will include the Learn to Swim, rehabilitation programs, fitness and training, and aquatic family. So we're aiming to have that completed in 2024. That's a significant project, and obviously will bring about a lot of improved amenity and activities for the Willoughby LGA. As I mentioned, we will be building an affordable housing, design and construction of affordable housing in Artarmon. So that's a $3 million project, and it is converting a vacant property into affordable housing. When I say affordable housing, some people get confused with affordable housing and social housing. They're very different. Affordable housing is for medium income, focusing on particular workers, and it's not the same as, you know, what people used to refer to as a housing commission. So it's very different, and council will be constructing that in 2024, or starting it, but completed by June 2024. Council will continue some of the work in Artarmon in the streetscape, and there's an $8 million construction project there, which will improve the village green and that vibrancy and opportunities to connect and sit and congregate in that area. Also, obviously, improving that retail strip and the business amenity for that area, including increased alfresco dining, public amenities, integration with the future shared path as well. So that's planned to be undertaken by the end of this year. Another one is a very large shared path between Chatswood and St Leonard's. And this one fills a gap, which is great. Obviously, this will support some of those trends in terms of getting people out and about, the connection to village centres, obviously the health and wellbeing of our community, and it's also consistent consistent with our bike plans from 2012 and 2017. So it's been identified for a while. Sorry.
We're getting a few comments in, so I just thought I'd break. That's all. We've got a couple of planning comments. One, a person raising that my understanding from people in the community is the council has not been listening to concerns about the new DCP. Can you provide information about the community's feedback? Well, I would imagine the answer there is that the feedback is open until June on that, and we encourage people to put feedback through that avenue, and the council will be listening to the community on that. But clearly there's a number of comments, and related to that is a concern about buildings on the Pacific Highway being allowed to have increases in height, and again another concern about overshadowing. So that question about transition zones and stepping down is very relevant. So we will get back to you on a specific answer on that, rather than sort of freelancing tonight as such. I think some specific questions about the Willoughby Leisure Centre. One is that how many trees are being removed in the leisure centre upgrade? Well, I can actually answer that one, because I did assist the council with some paperwork around that. And from my understanding is that yes, some trees will be removed, but overall, once the project's complete, there will be a tripling of trees at that particular project. So but we will confirm that in a written response. A concern about the cost of the leisure centre seemingly being excessive at 10 million compared to the Artarmon housing project. So thank you for that. But I'm pretty certain that there's been quite a close quantity surveying analysis of that cost, and a very helpful comment here about the Canopy development at Lane Cove, providing an exceptional sample of what a livable city environment might be like. So thank you for that.
Yeah, that's great feedback. I think one of the, in terms of the planning questions, as I mentioned, the LEP and DCP are on public exhibition at the moment. So for your information, what happens with that is council receives all the submissions, and this will be the same process for here, for these documents on public exhibition. The staff receive all the submissions, they go through those and they report that to council. So every submission and the issues identified in those submissions are reported to council with council's response to that. So I just want to assure people that when you do make a submission, whether that's through the Have Your Say, whether that's through the email, whether it's coming tonight, that information, your feedback will be captured and responded to before the council laws make a final decision. So, and obviously and Tanya, you might need to update me on this, but I understand that if you've made a submission, you are advised when that item is going to council. So if you wanted to attend the council meeting or log on and view the webcast, you can. Tanya, is that correct?
Yes, we'll provide an email to everybody that participated in that program and let them know the next steps.
Great, thank you.
Thanks.
Okay, so some of the other projects, we've got Artarmon Parklands Pavilion. So this is an adaptive reuse of an existing structure, and included to increase the capacity and create room for hire, a picnic area, new seating, recreation facilities for park and visitors, and an outdoor space. So that will be commencing relatively early in the new year. Another major project that we'll be doing is our Cultural Bites program, and this is a year-long calendar of cultural activities and events. Some of those are ticketed and some are free, and you may have noticed the giant gnomes around at the moment. So there's a lot of activities planned for over the next year, and really this is supporting the increasing patronage in the CBD, improving the economic impact within the CBD, and positioning Chatswood as a cultural heart of the North Shore.
One additional comment here just on the major projects is, how does the Chatswood to St Leonard's shared path fit with the just announced state strategy? Well, personally, I'm not aware of what strategy that is that it's referring to. So we just might need to touch more information on that to help get a strong response.
As I said, that shared path was identified in council's bike plan. So if there's a revised strategy from the state government, we'll have a look at that, obviously, and I'm sure our transport team are aware of that already. But certainly thank you for highlighting that. Okay, so our operational plan, I wanted to highlight, because in the operational plan, it includes our budget for the next year, and our resourcing strategy includes our long-term financial plan, as mentioned. And there are some financial challenges, but I must say council is in a sound financial position, but we do have the potential to be undermined by some of these elements. So we're very much, which are out of council's control. So we're very much focused on identifying these early and planning and being proactive around them. So staff expenses have increased, and that's due to the local government award increase, mandatory federal government super guarantee rate. So there's certainly increases there that are out of our control. And staff expenses make up around 39% of our total budget, of our expense budget. So that just gives you an indication of some of the challenges when you have some of those increases. We've got the Willoughby Leisure Centre, and it's not the full closure, it's part closure for 9 months. And obviously there's a big revenue loss there. And so, you know, nearly 900,000 that we will lose in terms of closing for that redevelopment. But obviously, as I said, that major project will provide a great outcome for the community in the longer term, but will be hit in the shorter term. We have a really tight labour market at the moment, and certainly council across New South Wales and businesses are finding it challenging to recruit, and it's an employees market at the moment, it seems, where employees are getting a lot of options and wanting increased wages. So that's something that we really need to consider. As well as increased costs of materials and services, and that comes back to some of the COVID trends and things happening in the Ukraine, etc. So again, elements outside of our control, but we're very conscious of it, and we're already feeling the heat on that. So we need to be very mindful of how we're going to manage that. There is ongoing certainty around our revenue streams due to COVID. You know, at the end of last year, we thought we were on the up in terms of getting some of our revenue back, but then we had another lockdown. So until we know what the future is in COVID, and I'm hoping that it's sort of plateaued over the last few months, there's still that uncertainty around that area. We do have currently, if you're a ratepayer, you will know that you contribute to an infrastructure levy that ends at the end of this financial year, which is a 7.3. It brings in 7.3% income. So that's a challenge for us in terms of our asset renewal and the infrastructure that we're providing. As I mentioned, our friends at IPART have actually, we planned for the 2.1 increase in our rates. They gave us a 0.7 plus a population increase of 0.1, so it's 0.8 instead of the 2.1. So that's a significant challenge for council in terms of our rates income. Inflation levels are higher than what we estimated. And that's not for any fault of our own. It was what was identified early on in the piece, and there's been some changes around that. As I mentioned, the state government changes in terms of waste policy, infrastructure development, contributions. So some of those challenges, again, we're not getting income as we planned, or we need to spend a lot more to be able to address some of those requirements of changes to state government policy. And obviously, as I mentioned before, increasing incidents of extreme weather, the cost of repair, cleanup, and also insurance premiums. And I know we've had a big hike in the last year. So some of those are the things, these are the challenges that we do have, and council is working very hard, both council laws and staff are working very hard to minimise costs and minimise the financial challenges and impose these out of our control challenges may pose for us. Okay, so our financial summary is there. That's just for 22-23. We're budgeting for a $1.7 million before grants and capital grants and contribution, a deficit of 1.7 million. And this moves to a surplus of 7.3 when the capital revenue is accounted for. We have been impacted by COVID. It's around a $20 million hit over the last 3 years, so that's significant. So although we've got a forecasted deficit for 2022-23, where staff are very confident that we can move that, and we've got plans to move that over the next coming years back into a surplus. So that is included in our long-term financial plan, which is in the resourcing strategy. We do, as I mentioned, IPART decreased the rate peg amount. So we had planned for 2.1% and they gave us a 0.8%. We need to find that rate base, that income. And what IPART have done is they've recognised that that has been a significant challenge for councils across New South Wales, not just Willoughby. And they've identified a new process, which is the additional special variation process, which is to allow councils to demonstrate that there is a significant need for IPART to reinstate that the planned forecast of our rate cap, which we had in our long-term financial plan. This will seek to address some of the financial challenges I listed below. So council has made a submission on that, and we won't find out until the end of June, days before we send all of these publicly exhibited documents to council for adoption. What that does mean is if we're successful with the special rate variation, the additional rate variation, overall rate revenue will still fall because we have ceased the infrastructure levy. It will mean that the average residential rate per property will still decrease. So even though we're putting in the additional special variation, it will mean that residential properties will receive a discount, or not a discount, decrease in the rates for 22-23. However, I must say we don't know if we're successful with that. So if we're not successful with that, we'll need to have a look at how we manage some of that financial uncertainty in the future.
So just a comment from Pete, he's just clarified, of course, that he was referring to the state bike strategy, which I do recall now has been launched in the last few weeks. So we'll have a look at alignment with that. And a bit of a curly one here, Maxine. Yeah. Is there any likelihood of the New South Wales government revisiting local government amalgamations? If so, what's the prospect is there of pressing for devolution of state functions with associated resources to achieve economies of scale and efficiency dividends, presumably at an enlarged council is what it's referring to. So I'm not sure if you want to go there or not.
No, that's certainly not something I could answer. That's more of a question for your state MPs. Yeah, I couldn't answer that, what's on their mind, so apologies for that. From memory, I think this shared path as well was quite significantly funded by the state government. So come in, welcome. I would assume, but I will double check this, I'm not sure how much, that it is aligned to their state policy, their new strategy. So thank you for that. We'll get back to you on that.
Also a comment, Maxine, about excessively large road street signs and a confusing number of signs which are both ugly and confusing in areas it looks to be Fuller's Road and Victoria Avenue. So can we have our streetscape back? Thank you. That's very well put.
Yeah, certainly those areas we can forward to our teams who deal with that, and obviously there's guidelines around how many signs to not impede vision of cars and pedestrians, so we can certainly have a look at those particular areas. Okay, now the other thing, I don't have a slide on it, is the fees and charges. So in the operational plan, there is a large document. We have, I think it's about 900 fees and charges. So that's quite a lot. We've done an increase, a general increase of around 3%. There are some which have gone up more, but the majority have been 3%. So if people are interested in the fees and charges, this is the time to, again, have your say on that, because once they're adopted in June, then that will be the fee and charge from the 1st of July. So that's a big document, but I know a lot of community organisations, sporting groups often like to have a look at that and get into the detail of that. So that is the overview of the Community Strategic Plan. I gave you some actions that were identified in the delivery program, and I've just gone through some of the big ticket items for the operational plan. as I said, the resourcing strategy we weren't going to go through tonight, but they're certainly there for you to have a look at. And if you've got any questions, I'm sure we will be able to answer them. So now, really, I'll just go through the Have Your Say process. So as I mentioned, any comments that you've given in the chat or any through our Q&A, we will take down, and that will form part of the feedback that we receive through the public exhibition. You can make a formal submission. You can respond to the survey. So on Council's website, the Have Your Say page, there's a survey which you can click through if that's more your style rather than writing an email. We do have a session that's next week on Wednesday, which is an in-person one. So if anyone has specific questions or want to talk to staff, please come along to that. We were saying earlier, it's often hard to do some of these when it's when you're not in person. You miss out on some of the nuances of understanding what a project is about, of being able to really understand what the community's issues are. So that if that opportunity is next Wednesday, can I just clarify, Tanya, where's that at?
It's at the concourse in the theatre foyer area. So it's at the top of the concrete stairs. There's a large foyer area there, and we'll be waiting for them.
Great. We will provide enough signage so you can go to that. You can just drop in. You can register or you can just drop in. We would love to see you there. Any formal submissions, you can make them via our general email. Submissions will be publicly available. Just let us know if you don't want your personal details to be known. Now, the closing date is the 30th of May. And I'll go through that in a minute. So that's the formal part of the evening. How did I go for time? Have we got lots of time for Q&A? Good. Okay, so I'll hand over to Mark and we'll work out if there are any questions that we can answer.
Yeah, we've got a couple of additional comments that have come in. There was no elaboration on advocating on the Northern Beaches Link Tunnel. Please advise Council's position on this. You might be able to go there, Maxine. And also a question which we may need to get back to David on the funds once being allocated for a bike path from Chatswood Golf Course to Middle Harbour. It was a planned project some 10 years ago, so we could get back on that. So maybe we'll just answer the Northern Beaches Tunnel Link question first, and then we'll get into the spoken Q&A.
So Northern Beaches Link Tunnel, there were at the time, which was quite some time ago, Council did make submissions to the state government around that and raised a number of significant concerns. And only recently the Council endorsed further advocacy on that matter through the state member. And so Council are working on continuing that advocacy role for some of the concerns that we had around the Northern Beaches Link Tunnel. So it's certainly on the agenda, and I know some of the councillors have particular interest in that, so I'm not sure if they're on and they want to talk about that in the chat as well.
We also took a poll of 270 of our own local area community members to help support our submission. Okay. So we knew how they were feeling about it.
Great, thank you.
So just for people to know, that's Tanya, my colleague, Tanya Stark, who I referred to earlier, who's answering some questions as well. I just would say that we're going to move into a part of the session tonight where we are going to be inviting people to actually talk. So we want to actually hear from you rather than just see your chat. If you do want to talk, please raise your hand. And then everyone is currently on mute. Once you do raise your hand, our colleague Jason, our tech support here, he'll then actually unmute you, and then you'll actually have to unmute yourself so your microphone's on. There could be a delay of several seconds, so it might just be a matter of patience. So the process really is raise your hand. I will then call you. You'll be unmuted at our end. You unmute yourself at your end, and then we talk. I thought I quickly saw a hand raised. and then I didn't see it raised. If not, we do also have people here in the chamber who may want to ask a question as well, or they may not want to. We have been having some great comments on chat, so I can understand if everyone's potentially asked the questions they want to. And I think from my community radio days, Maxine, the trick is you keep talking during these particular instances until someone actually says something, and here we go. David Grover, so you've got the call, and Jason will just unmute you, then we'll hear from you.
Okay, can I be heard?
Yes, David, welcome.
Great. I thought I'd fill silences. I'm usually guilty of filling silences. I just wanted to make a remark that Willoughby Council, to their great credit, has been fighting against the digital sign to be erected by the railways on the railway bridge right beside the Garden of Remembrance digital advertising billboard. And Council and myself and many others have raised objections, including Chatswood Westward Progress Association, both to the one in Help Street and this one in Albert. And it was banned on the Igloo apartment side and not on the side for the Garden of Remembrance. The reason I'm raising it in this forum is, to me, if that sign goes in, many of the things that we're trying to achieve about the future livability of the city will be irreversibly damaged in that area. That Garden of Remembrance is meant to be a space of peaceful remembrance and passive thoughts, and it's meant to be a serene place and a meaningful one. And that sign will be huge, visible, very brightly lit 24 hours a day in that exact spot. To me, that is just as important as protecting the residents on the other side, which the Department of Planning and Environment did do, but they haven't done it on this side. They've permitted the sign to go ahead, and I think a couple of councillors and others are trying to perhaps appeal against this decision. But does not council have any control whatsoever over issues like that, which have a permanent effect on our city? We've been able to avoid in Willoughby digital billboards and billboards of any kind, except the one that's on the Pacific Highway that has historical origins to direct people to Grace Brothers originally, when it existed. But now we're getting them on the railway bridges. To me, this is crass, short-sighted, and quite greedy of the state government.
Thanks, David. I'm not sure of the specifics of that issue, but we can certainly chase that up. But you did raise a point around local council's role in and what influence we have, and council's role in development and planning proposals has changed over the years, and we don't have as much control as people might think that we do. Certainly we can develop strategies, but some of the approvals are taken out of our hands. So I'm not sure of the specifics of this one, but we can certainly take that on board. And I must note, where I sit in the council building, I overlook that park, and it's lovely, and it does give me some serene moments during the day.
Well, enjoy them while you can, till the sign goes in. It's a huge sign, and no control of what ads go up. Or there were certain controls, but it's just distasteful to me to have the sign erected at that position. Yes, I understand councils right throughout the state have had a lot of opportunities taken from them, but this has an impact, doesn't it, on your planning and all the things that were involved in here? Are we wasting our time with a lot of issues where we would like to establish certain principles that get overturned in the end?
I would never say it's a waste of time to say what your aspirations are and what sort of community we want to create. it's I guess it comes back to how we advocate and work with the state government to try and get them on board to what we're needing in this community. I certainly take your point, David, and as I said, I'm not familiar with that particular one, but we can take that on board and find out some more information for you.
Yeah,
Sure.
I would say as a former officer of the planning department, my recollection is that the state does have a fairly tight control over significant advertising in major transport corridors, but we can look at that more closely. I would say that...
Yeah, it's a planning environment that did approve that sign, and it went to them because it was railways. Otherwise, Willoughby Council would have had the right to determine it.
Yeah. And as well, as Maxine did say earlier, that the council is looking at strengthening its advocacy function, and that would include advocating if this was an issue raised, and form part of our strategic planning, advocating on concerns about this form of signage as well. I would also say that I just acknowledge the comment from Councillor Samuel in that vein on the beaches link. And he makes very clear that the current council unanimously agreed to write to the local state MP requesting that the link in its current form be rethought. The previous council agreed on a similar resolution opposing the tunnel. The tunnel is within the state's jurisdiction. So thanks you for that. We've got another Q&A comment. What's the latest update on the Castle Crag quadrangle redevelopment? Is the model displayed in the council paperwork the final design? We may just investigate that separately and come back to you. But we also do have more people who want to talk to us. So King Tang, you're next on.
Hi. Well, earlier I mentioned about number 10 Brown Street, which is a building built more than 20 years ago in 1999. And the top 11 floors are residential, and the lower 8 floors, 1 to 9, I think, are used as service apartments. Used to be run, well, partly is run by Mantra. And however, we appeal to council about change of the use of the apartments from service apartment to residential. And the council the planning people keep saying that, well, this is a commercial area and all that, blah, blah, blah. I mean, this is something 20 years ago. I mean, but you try to split the well, we're told that the western side of Chatswood is to be treated as commercial, and eastern side is, I don't know, some business or what. But I mean, this is most unfair to the owners, you know. You're holding the apartment for 20 years. And I mean, there's no business. Well, because of pandemic, service apartment is not popular anymore. But the council wants to stick to its guns and keep it as service apartment, you know.
So thank you, King. Look, you made that comment in the chat as well. We certainly don't want to speculate tonight on a response. This is obviously an issue that is a very important planning issue, and we'd like to give you a credible response as to the council's position here and why this is the case. We do know that job creation in Chatswood remains an ongoing priority, but I think that's about all we'd say for the moment.
Yeah, but I mean, and that's what you say, there's a problem with housing affordability. Then you should have more apartments. These are already available, but you don't let people to stay there to rent it out. You just give a service apartment, which not many people want to do it. So that's a mismatch there.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Rachel, you're next on.
Can you hear me now?
Now we can.
Okay, look, my comment, actually not a question, is about North Shore Hospital. And as you know, it straddles Willoughby Council, Lane Cove, North Sydney, but it provides the major hospital facility for the residents of Willoughby City Council. And I wondered whether, and I think most people would know about the plans to redevelop some vacant land there, but I wondered if Willoughby Council was lobbying against this development. I myself had written to Nick Wright and Gladys when she was the Premier, and Anthony Roberts. And no one seems to have take on the importance of this. And there are thousands and thousands and thousands of new residents going to be living in Chatswood, specifically in St Leonard's. And if that vacant land is used for commercial development and a school, which is ridiculous, there'd be no playground for children, and mainly commercial, it eliminates any possibility or realistic possibility of the hospital being expanded to accommodate all of those extra residents. And I do think that is a project that Willoughby Council needs to take on and advocate for their residents. This is our major hospital, and it's urgent actually, because there are virtually no vacant beds. The people working there have advocated, the doctors, I myself have worked there, and it's a very serious problem, and it's just left dangling, and without anyone taking responsibility, it seems. Even on the website, you've got the hospital and without saying, well, there's nothing formal's being put to Willoughby Council. I think Willoughby Council could be proactive and advocate. It's logical. It's actually a bit crazy to develop what little bit of vacant land there is there when the hospital needs expansion.
Thanks, Rachel. I know that St Leonard's is identified as a significant centre, and there's a lot of work that has happened with the state government and between the councils that you've mentioned. So there's a lot of plans and a strategy in place around that. So I'm not sure of the detail of what you're particularly referring to, and if it is already included in that those discussions that have happened. We can certainly chase that up. I'm not familiar with any other historic discussions or resolutions of council which relate specifically to that, but we will follow that up for you.
Well, actually, for all the residents of Willoughby Council, because if that decision goes ahead, that the consequences are really very serious and not thought through at all. And it isn't just St Leonard's that's being developed. You've got plans to develop Chatswood, and the development, the population's growing, and hospital facilities have to be preserved. So that's what I'm suggesting Willoughby Council be proactive in advocating for the retention of a viable hospital on that site, not to sell off land to developers.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, thank you. Are there any further comments this stage? We've had some pretty, yes, we have a comment from an actual real person. You're a real person, but a person that we can see. So go ahead.
Is it on? Yeah. Mark and Maxime, thank you. It was fantastic, really clear and very interesting. And everything the council is doing seems great. I just had a question about young people, because the strategy is for the next 10 years. And I find, having come to a few council meetings over the last few years, that while I'm not young, I'm one of the youngest people that tends to be here. And so I'm just interested to know how you have gone about engaging with young people in the community, because you're building things that are going to take many years to come to fruition in many cases. And I'm just curious, in this process that we're all going through, how do you engage with young people, and is that something that you can do better as well?
Well, the tenure is actually going to address that question.
Thank you, Marcus, for that. And that's a really good point. It is very difficult and we often struggle to get to young people. So we've deliberately put in some targeted groups to reach out to who don't normally participate, including youth. So we've written to all of the schools and asked them to put in something into their newsletters to send out to the parents so that young families get involved as well. We've also asked the school curriculums if we can have a webinar with relevant students, senior students across the schools so that they can be involved and we can get some feedback online. Previously, we have had in this chamber up to about 150 students and lots of post-it notes on the walls, etc., for all sorts of engagement, including 4 years ago when we had 6,000 comments for the overhaul of the city strategy at that time. So we haven't given up. We haven't heard too much back from them as yet, but we're going to reach out to our Willoughby Youth Action Group and interview kids that are at our centres ourselves. So it's a bit hard to grab them on the streets because you get arrested, but we are keen to interview them and find out what they are feeling. So if anyone's got any young people, we'd love for them to jump online and complete a survey. That'd be great.
And Marcus, as an old youth worker, not old, but a previous youth worker in my very early career, it is very challenging to engage young people in stuff like this. A lot of the time they're more interested in the projects and the detail and, you know, if we're building a shared path, then there's opportunities around that rather than the big picture strategy, unless we do what we did a number of years ago, which is, you know, having a session which is just particularly targeting young people. So I think council has, as Tanya said, a number of services and networks that they work with to engage young people. It's certainly an element that we need to focus on, every council needs to focus on, because it's such a hard group to tackle. And I imagine will be part of the engagement strategy that we'll be working on.
Thank you for that. The other thing that's apparent to me is that at least the area where I live and the people that I spend time with, a lot of them are born overseas. And that's obviously an increasingly large part of the residents of Willoughby. And are you getting their voices as well? And are they having their say as much as they perhaps should?
Thanks. Probably me again. We've been walking the streets with flyers and deliberately targeting all sorts of different communities within our area. We've also got a multicultural centre that has 7 representative cultural social groups. So we've used those existing social networks that we support to reach out to their members as well, to encourage participation. And we've got posters up down at that centre and flyers and sending them emails. So they're probably sick of us by now, but we're doing everything that we can on the multicultural side of things, and posters at our assets as well.
And I'd also say, Marcus, that as Maxine mentioned, we do have to prepare a new community engagement strategy by the end of this year. That's actually a statutory requirement under the Local Government Act, and it will be an opportunity for us to reassess our approach to some of these harder to reach groups and to define very clearly how we're doing that on an ongoing basis. So I think that's quite an exciting opportunity to do that as well. I think there's some additional comments we've received about the concern not only just for hospital services, but the issues of primary and secondary school capacity. Absolutely. Although these sometimes tend to be dealt with, as people know, at the sub-regional level of planning. But nevertheless, the council is a significant player in decisions about housing growth and resultant infrastructure. And there's a question here which I must admit, Maxine, I might have missed something, but the context, where will the new public school sited? I don't know if I've quite understood that question myself, And I'm looking at you in a puzzled look to see if you understand it.
And I'm probably looking back at you as a puzzle.
So, Em, if you'd like to clarify a little bit just what you're getting at there in terms of the new public school, because I'm not sure. I'd like to ask if anyone in the Zoom call would like to make an additional comment or question, because the microphone is currently open if you would like to do that. Yes, Mike's come to the party. Mike, you're on.
Can you hear me?
Yes, perfect.
Yeah, so I think I'm assuming that Em's talking about the overcrowding of Chatswood Public School. That's my assumption, and linked to the hospital services and preparing for expansion. I suppose a lot of my understanding and my own personal concern is increasing capacity and increasing property and heights and things like that. And yet, which is great, wanting to increase, cater for the increase of numbers and providing more facilities and things like that. I'm totally for that. But in increasing apartments, it puts pressure on infrastructure, on transport, on schools, on, like the lady said, the hospitals. And so, yeah, I think that's my concern. And I'm not sure what Willoughby City Council, how does Willoughby City Council sit on that? I know you guys probably have pressure from New South Wales State to increase capacity. And I know that, is it around the Gordon? I can't remember, that council has pushed against that, those pressures. I wonder what Willoughby City Council's view is in terms of those pressures of people living in the area and seeing their facilities being pushed to the limit, and yet wanting, and therefore people's lives in Chatswood who live in the midst of Chatswood are sort of stretched. Can you respond to that?
I think, Mike, it was Mike, wasn't it?
Yes, it is.
Yep. It's a really tough question, because a lot of the infrastructure that you're talking about is state government responsibility. Obviously, council is involved in trying to influence that and working with state government agencies and departments to plan for our communities. And as you know, as you may have seen, one of the outcomes is around livability, and our community have clearly said they want that balance between the green space, the development, the usability, the livability, the vibrancy of our area. Council does have housing targets. We get that from the state government. We're required to meet those. So there's that level of impetus on us. And I guess it also comes back to what I was referring to earlier around the infrastructure contributions review that the state government are doing. Part of that, at the moment, they have state infrastructure contributions areas, and they're changing that to regional or they're proposing to change that to regional infrastructure contribution areas to really, I guess, their approach is to provide better support to state government services and infrastructure required, I would imagine, like hospitals and schools. In terms of the specifics of the Chatswood Public School or the hospital, I can't give you that. But what I can say is our council have got planning strategies to help us address the targets that we've been given by the state government. Those strategies do aim to find that balance with what you're talking about and the challenges that some of our residents see. And those elements are probably the things that we would forward onto our planning area and to consider in the LEP and any of the other planning strategies that they're developing. I can't give you a specific answer, and individual council laws may have different opinions. But what I can say is council is very mindful of how we find that balance, and I don't know if there's a council that has found that balance for every single resident. Residents want different things. So trying to do the best that we can with what we know and what we know the aspirations are for the community whilst meeting the state government requirements is the challenge that we've got.
I mean, I'd also say, Maxine, that it has been pretty clear tonight that it's a key theme coming through in consultation, that people are raising the issue of both the local impacts of development and the broader infrastructure impacts. So it's good to see that theme coming through. Anything else, Mike, or that's okay? No. Okay, we'll move on to Helen, who's got her hand up. So Helen, you're on the call.
I just suggest to everyone that the Department of Planning and the state government override the councils at all times. And I think we should all get and write to Anthony Roberts, who is the minister with the hospital. Anthony Roberts is the minister concerned there. The Premier should have a say in it, and the Department of Planning. And the person probably to go to is Mr. Stokes, who seems to be, I don't know, rattling the whatever on all levels and trying to push residential into everywhere with bad heights and not the infrastructure, but write to them directly.
Thanks, Helen. Sorry.
Yeah, and I acknowledge the comment of Councillor Samuel concurring with that approach. So we are waiting to see if anyone else would like to talk. I think we've had good feedback tonight. We when we started the night, we really didn't know how many people were going to be attending. So we're actually quite pleasantly surprised, because we do acknowledge that sometimes these documents are a little distant to people's day-to-day lives, and we also acknowledge that people are extraordinarily busy in their day-to-day lives.
And also that, you know, we are mindful that we can't answer every single question, but we do commit to taking it on board and giving you that answer. So we will do that after this.
So if we don't have any additional comments, I may bring the meeting to a close a little bit early. I would just, before I go to Maxine, I would just reiterate that that point, that we acknowledge that you've given your time to us tonight for free, and with that comes a responsibility on us to respond to the issues you've raised. So we intend to do that. But I might just now throw to Maxine to talk about the next steps. Yeah. So I might just throw to Maxine now.
Thanks, Mark. Okay, the final slide for you. So apologies if you felt it was death by slideshow. The exhibition period finishes on the 30th of May. And we have a council report going to late June, which will include all the submissions received and the themes that have come out from that, and what council staff response has been. Council laws will then consider that at a council meeting. And we have to have that sent to the Office of Local Government by the 30th of June. So we're on a very short time frame this year, and that's been the case because we've had the election, which was delayed a little bit. What we do, just for your information, is that we do 6 monthly reports on the progress on these documents on the delivery program, and we do quarterly reviews on the operational plan. And then we do an annual report, which brings it all together. So what we've achieved over the year. One thing to note is we will start this process again after and maybe slightly before the next election, which is September 2024. And the process for that will be dependent on which way the councillors want to go, whether it's a lot more detailed and or it's a refresh. So these, as I don't think I mentioned right up front, the community strategic plan is supposed to be an enduring document. It's supposed to be, as I said, a 10-year plan which really drives how we make decisions and resource the organisation so we can meet your aspirations. So we don't want to... There's a challenge in significantly revising it every 4 years. It's not tied to a council term as such, with the reporting is tied to that, but the long-term nature of the community strategic plan is there, and that's one thing that we're very conscious of in terms of our planning. So we will be revisiting this process again in 2024, but we do put our operational plan on exhibition every year. So every year, the operational plan, which reminder is the 1-year plan of projects, rates, fees and charges, and budget, is out on exhibition every year. So they're the next steps. As I mentioned, the 18th of May next week, if you want to come down to the concourse, please do. We will be there. Other staff will be there. If you've got any particular questions, please put them in email. They can send emails now if you've got questions that you want us to answer, so we can respond to that for you. And if there is general comments, please put them in by the 30th of May so we can consider that as part of the exhibition. Once again, thank you so much for your time. For the people who came here, and also the number of people who logged on, I hope you've had a nice glass of wine and some dinner while you've been listening to us prattle on. I appreciate the level of respect that you've shown in terms of the questions, how you've asked the questions, and your interest in what we're doing. So thank you very much for your time, and have a good evening. Thanks.